starting this. Warm wishes to all my viewers. I am Deepika. I am co-founder at N Talents. N Talents is a talent management company. We are using technology to enhance talent assessments both for recruitment and learning development purposes. Now, today with us, we have Mr. Shashikant Pawar, who is the DGM at Glenmark Pharma's Learning Center. He has a huge experience in designing trainings for employees. He is also experienced in designing leadership modules, giving trainings to leaders. And why we are here to design a video interview series specifically for HRs in the segment of pharmaceutical businesses who are coping up with the change of the post-COVID world where everything has gone virtual suddenly. And also because pharma sector is the one sector which has never stopped working even through the lockdown. In fact, most of the businesses are actually growing and they have got new businesses to cope up with. Recruitments, learning development is all has kept on or maintained a certain pace. So HRs, when I talk to our clients who are in pharma, most of them, they tend to discuss with us how other people or others of our clients are coping up with this change and how are they managing their own HR teams, because as HR leaders they are also facing this trouble of how to reskill their own teams and how to make them cope up with the technology or technological changes that are happening. So we've launched this video interview series specifically to address those issues and discuss what is it that companies like us can do and what is it that is expected from us in times like these. So I welcome you, Shashikant sir, to this video series. You are one of our first guests.
Namaste.
Namaste, sir. Now, I would just like to start this conversation. If you could give us a brief background of what your experience has been in your career regarding learning and development and how you have started your career and then eventually landed up in your present position at Glenmark.
Well, it's a long journey. 21 years I'm in the industry. Though I did not start with HR or L&D background, I started with my master's in science and then master's in management in marketing. And I chose to do initial first 5-6 years or rather 7 years of my career, especially in sales. Well, I have a belief that people must do a sales job at least few years in their career, in their life. In fact, there are two jobs people should do. People must, or rather, I recommend that if it is possible, one should serve in the army. That gives a different perspective, that gives a different experience of life to people. And if that's not feasible, at least you should work in sales for a few years. So that's where I spent my early career in sales, worked across the country in different product segments. And the calling was to move to L&D since my MBA days, and that's where I moved to learning and development, especially in soft skills domain. And coming from sales background and service background, I think I wasn't too much of skills training with respect to sales service. Gradually moved to more soft skills, and obviously the gradual progression is towards leadership training, coaching, and various combinations of learning and organizational development initiatives. That is what I do currently.
So you were talking about everyone at least doing sales for some time in their careers. So you have moved from studying science to doing sales and then eventually moving on to training. What I find is salespeople are known to be at least popular as people who are impatient to reach targets and they're very keen for progression. Whereas trainers are very known to be extremely patient with all kinds of audiences. So how what a contrast it is. So please tell us more about this.
A very good question. I think sales people have a certain degree of aggression, I can say.
Yes.
Aggression And that reflects in the personalities, that reflects in their dealing with people. What you said, impatience. Yeah, that's a correct word, impatient for performance. And I experienced that. I was a top sales guy for my companies. And so when I left, I did not, many people leave sales in disgrace because they're not able to meet targets or not able to cope up with the life of daily or monthly or quarterly stress. In my case, I was a top when I quit. So everybody was surprised, including my MD. He said, "Why are you leaving? You are doing great. You would be so and so. You would be VP in this much time, this, that." I said, "I understand, but I chose this world uh, for a certain experience, and not experience of month, 2 months, 6 months, but few years to live, to grow, to establish." And then my calling has always been in the learning and development space. And that's the first learning, that how do you change a part of you? How do you transform a part of you, which is like that aggressive, which is that go-getting spirit for self and others? Because I used to handle a large team also of people. So I'm not, initially I was a solo performer, self-starter, but in the later stage of career, I had a huge team was reporting to me. And when I was at the top, that means the whole team was performing better.
Right.
So managing large team, managing their aspirations, and instilling that aggression, or what my boss used to call salesman's ego, into that, and then coming into a role where you cannot display these characteristics. Rather, you got to develop certain patience in listening to people, in understanding needs, and that was the first transformation I experienced. Thanks to numerous training programs that I attended on my own, some sponsored, but largely on my own, so that faith in that people can learn and grow, people can change and transform, that faith came to me because of that experience of transformation. See, unless a facilitator or trainer has gone through a self transformation journey, the conviction doesn't come to train others.
Correct.
And that's why I believe that every trainer, every facilitator, or rather every leader for that matter, has to constantly be on the transformation journey and stand up as an example in front of people before you give any theory or practice or matrices or any training program as such.
So while you're talking of change, what I notice in your career is you have also switched from, let's say, insurance oriented industries or finance oriented industries to pharmaceuticals. What change do you find is very stark in these two industries? And when you came into pharma, how did you find it different from others?
So not only insurance, I think from my sales period only, I have never repeated an industry. I started with paints. I sold paints, industrial paints. Then I sold plastics, the consumer durables, the PET bottles that you see, the whole range of PET products. Then I sold consumer durables and loans, personal loans. Then I moved to training, trained across different sectors, from manufacturing to service to aviation. In the early years of Air Deccan, I even trained the airline staff for customer service. So one industry experience for me was not the criteria. The criteria was wide and large. Though yes, there are differences. Every industry has their own dynamics, has their own challenges. Rather, I would focus more on what is commonality. Commonality is there are people everywhere, and that's what is common. And those people are same. Yeah, people adapt to certain practices because of the industry demand, but at core they remain what they are, people. And that's what appeals to me. Well, that's what I used in soft skill domain or later in leadership training. Whatever is the industry, people's behavior continues to remain the same, and the need for transformation continues to remain the same across the segments, across the industry fractions.
So,
Uh,
when I'm talking to the HRs who are in our connections in the pharma industry, most of them tend to say that the industry itself is very complicated in terms of requirements. So, even writing job descriptions is very tough, and it's not that one person from Glenmark could fit into any other pharma industry as such. They say that there's a lot of need to understand what the person was doing there. The processes are very stringent, and it's very there's too much to understand for them. That's what they say.
Not really so. Not really so. It appears like that. It's different. It appears like that. It's not that. Industry is fairly standardized. Where is the difference is which kind of markets are you catering to? If you're catering to global markets, catering to US, Europe, then uh, there are very stringent norms to follow for an industry. For a domestic player, there are so the regulations changes as per the market that you're dealing with, and the company has to write their processes based on which market they're operating, what kind of regulations exist in that market, and that's where maybe people find it a little different. Uh, there's another standard practice that's called CGMP, especially in the manufacturing side of pharma. The current good manufacturing practices, the current good laboratory practices, the current good warehousing practices. We call it GXP as a generic term. So GXP is fairly common, and GXP is a guiding, say, process or a document for most pharma companies, and most of the processes are written in-house based on the GXPs. So, yes, job roles are immense. Job roles are multiple, and some people may find it difficult to write those job roles, but not once you are an insider. From outside, if you see, you find it a lot of complex. And for me, it was very complex when I came to this industry first time. But being there for a few years, then you get the game. I think people who come and spend few years, 1 year, 2 year in the pharma space, and then possibly they're saying it's fairly complex. I would recommend spend at least 5 years for any industry for you to appreciate. And, this is my 8th year in Glenmark and in pharma industry. I'm beginning to understand, you can say now, how this industry functions. It's pretty simple. That way, it's pretty simple.
Especially in India, the pharma industry is one of the leading ones. Like the number of companies we have, the amount of business we generate across the globe, we are global leaders, and more so post COVID, it's been emphasized even more. So, what kind of new pressures do you feel after these phase of Corona?
Oh, there is huge pressure to produce more and more medicines because the need is increasing here. People have become more conscious, and that's why certain products, the need has shot up like anything, especially in the area of hygiene, personal hygiene, and stuff like that.
Correct.
Right. Also supplements, because more and more people are now relying on supplements for nutrients that you usually uh, don't get from all kind of foods that you eat. So pharma has been struggling to keep the manufacturing on, to keep the distribution lines on, and make sure that the last patient gets the medicine. Nobody suffers because there is no medicine. So that's a very positive pressure for an industry. And uh, thanks to our our team members, our manufacturing operations have risen to this demand, this challenge, and we have produced more than what we did last year, in spite of the fact that many people were not able to attend office or attend factory because they were stuck somewhere and stuff like that. So the attendance uh, was lesser, but everybody contributed to more production.
I remember when we were having conversation regarding doing assessments in the production unit for the production unit staff. You told me that at a time only 1/3 or half of the employees can come in the unit because of the COVID restrictions. So I was wondering when these already the industry is known for so many rules, regulations, and restrictions. And then above and beyond, there are new restrictions. So how do you feel the people or the employees are coping up with this strange kind of pressure? Because anyway, in personal lives, all of us have been facing strange pressures, and we have been observing strange changes in our own behaviors post this, because isolation itself has caused a lot of troubles, no socializing, and it's been a long time now. So have you seen changes in the behaviors of employees?
In fact, I would say pharma guys, pharma employees, especially in the manufacturing sector, were best suited to cope up with this change,
Okay.
because these people are used to wearing the PPEs, the masks, all the protective gears for 8 to 12 hours during their shift. So they were already doing this inside of the plant. Only in the initial phase, when there was a lot of confusion and the information was not clear, we added a layer more or two of clothing to their already their gowning process. So we constantly keep on search whether it's required and stuff like that, and keep changing accordingly. So for them, adapting to this was easy. They were already doing this when the world was not doing. These guys were used to wearing and changing these gowns also 2-3 times in a day during lunchtime and stuff like that. So we adapted very fast, and that's the reason there wasn't much time in coping with this change. I think the time spent was how can we be more productive in spite of this,
Okay.
because the demand for medicines and the life-saving medicines will continue to increase. And that's why it's commendable that our people have risen to the occasion and brought about personal transformation in the way they handle work. And that's where the productivity has gone up. No new machines were added, not technology changed. It's people who realize what is the need of the world and enhanced their own productivity. That's commendable.
That's truly commendable, because we've been reading so many things about how employees in the initial 5 to 6 months were curious about what is going to happen, and they were all very concerned in a positive way. But now, because it's stretched to a limit where no one knows where the end is, probably the uncertainty has grown even more. Initially there was a lot of positive enthusiasm towards, some nationalistic fervor was also there, but now everything has dissolved. So probably now is the time when people need more support than ever. So is Glenmark taking some initiatives to know about these pressures, or to ease these pressures? Or what has changed post COVID from the policy perspective in human resource, or from initiative perspective in human resources?
The very first need is welfare of the people. During this entire lockdown period, when it was difficult for people to move out and the production pressures were on, we ensured that everybody gets a grocery at their home delivered. Employees don't have to go out for anything else. In some places, we made housing arrangements for people near the plant, so that they are kind of for 15 days, they don't go anywhere else. They go from that hotel or that housing to the plant and plant back to there. They're protected, they're quarantined, their families are protected, like that. So work from home policy was never in place for other staff or office staff. We realized during this that work from home is at times, not at times, for many job roles, actually working better. So those kind of changes are happening. Now also, in commensurate with government regulations, we are only experimenting with 30% of the staff in office. So that's the reason I'm in office today. And we are experimenting how is it going. Based on that, policies are forming. We're not taking ad hoc decisions for policy matters. We are experimenting, we're seeing what's working for everybody, the welfare of everybody is in place, and accordingly, the changes will happen. And that's a cautious approach, and that's what we have kept since beginning.
Okay. The providing housing near production units is a great initiative, because in cities, in larger cities, wherever production units are, for example, Goa or Mumbai, we've seen only news that they have been worst hit, and even in the
Housing
initial
in the
phase,
sense, temporary housing for them,
yeah.
lodging boarding arrangement, so that they don't go home every day from work and expose the family members. In some place we make arrangements for staying in the plant itself, so that they're available. So it's not only that we've made arrangement, people have agreed to such arrangement, and that's a greatness. That people have immensely contributed during this, and that must be acknowledged, that must be revered and respected. And I'm saying this in the public forum right now for others to know that behind the curtains there are a lot of people who make different kind of sacrifices, and the sacrifices that the pharma people are doing must be known to the world.
Correct. So extending little more on the policy perspective that you are saying, in terms of the requirement of talent or the attrition rates that pharma has, because a lot of competitors are there, the industry is very huge, and it is perceived that at least in sales or business development roles, people move very quickly. This is a general perception. So what did you feel changed after COVID? Were people sticking to companies more, or what was the general feeling, or how did it impact attrition in the industry?
So considering the lockdown period, the attrition rates have dropped drastically during the last 8-9 months, and there were obvious reasons about it. As an organization, we believe that being a competitive industry, being growing industry in India as well, there will be attrition. And it's not a question of that we're losing talent. It's the same talent which keeps circulating in the industry. So people who go and acquire diverse experiences and they come back. There are many cases in Glenmark where people have come back to us. So we don't worry much about attrition as such. I think up to 20% attrition is fine, we say.
Okay.
Attrition starts hitting the organization, it goes beyond 30-35%, where productivity is impacted. And that's the reason we believe that identifying talent, giving differential treatment to talent. We onboard attrition, looking at onboard across the board attrition is not important. Looking at talent attrition, if my good people are leaving, we should be doing something about it. And that's where we continue to design different interventions and programs to identify the talent and retain them with differential treatment, not only COM, but all other drivers of engagement.
Okay. So when you're saying differential treatment at a scale as high as that of Glenmark, how much do you think differential treatment is practical, or it is feasible to implement, or have you been able to observe that certain practices work better than others? So what's your experience on it?
As I said some time ago, we are people, we are human beings, and we are, though we take pride in saying that we are rational, logical, but at the core we are a bundle of emotions. There are very basic human needs which are at play in our day-to-day interactions. I think David Rock, in his book Your Brain at Work, beautifully captures that in the form of a SCARF model. So which are the 5 components that make us behave in a positive manner towards behavior? Status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. And I've been studying this model and using this model for a long time now. I find it fascinating. Very simple things. Very simple things. If managers, if leaders remember and practice in the interactions with people, a basic respect, if is restored in all conversations and interactions, it becomes easy to engage, retain, and make people be productive and grow. There isn't a rocket science behind this. You don't have to do a lot. In fact, many studies indicate that paying more is counterproductive. increasing comp to a very large level reduces productivity. And that's why Daniel Pink beautifully captures that in his book, his TED Talk, with the scientific evidence that autonomy, mastery, and purpose, these are the three drivers of productivity. So again, the autonomy is common with SCARF model. Give people more opportunities to design their own work environment. If not big decisions, small decisions, let them make those small decisions. Continuously engage with them, conversations with them, and a two-way conversation. Listen to people. If these things are taken care of, if these things are embedded in the processes, we have engagement.
So
Allow
do you
people
not?
to mastery,
Sorry.
allow people, help people to achieve personal mastery in the chosen field. You have an engagement. And that has been the purpose of learning and development and OD, for us to design interventions where these basic innate human needs are fulfilled.
Especially in the quality assurance or the production staff, where, as we discussed, there are already so many set of rules to be followed, and in people's mind, there's always this checklist of what is it that they have done, what is left. So the way we see it might be different as managers, but people who are executing, they continuously have to run that checklist around. So with this in place, where do you find the scope of giving them autonomy? And also, how do we sort of give them opportunity to be creative in their own small ways, and like you said, take their own mini decisions, if not larger decisions? And then once you've decided, uh, how do you enable your HR team or a team of managers to make sure they do it in turn with the on ground staff?
So as they say, you can't change GMP, so you can't tell, that do your process the way you like it. And compliance is very huge in pharma industry. People know it. That's why in recruitment itself, we tend to screen people who are high on compliance. Right? But that's the first requirement in the first place. People to be compliant to processes. Processes are bigger than anything else at the workplace, because process is assuring me the quality of the medicine. That's the quality assurance is all about. It's not individual, nobody one person, but the process, following the process to the T assures that the medicine of specific quality will be out. And that's the challenge with pharma product, because you can taste it. You can taste the parameters, chemical and physical parameters of the medicine, but not its efficacy. That is tested at the patient level. So yes, you're right. We can't give too much of liberty to people to choose their ways of working. There are many other areas where, if the decisions are taken in consultation with employees, taking them on board, giving small, like one of our plant heads, he does a beautiful thing. In the beginning of the month, he calls everybody and say, "Hey guys, this is what we produced last month, and you did a commendable job. What is the target that this month you want to take?" Well, this is a plan that has come from the head office, but do you agree with this, or you want to do more? People collectively decide the target of the month, and then he communicates back that we will produce so much. Now tell me, had it been a diktat, this wouldn't have worked. This team is consistently breaking their own records every month. That's the power of autonomy. Managers learn to use it in small, big ways, will find huge engagement and productivity both. That's the thing. One has to be creative. As a manager, I need to be creative. That how can I use the science that is known to us now? Science is available to us. It's up to us to see whether we become conventional and continue to do what we've been doing for 20 years, or change. and see different results.
Correct, correct. Now, I would like you to switch the conversation towards something that a lot of junior HR officers, they have been discussing with us. So people who are getting into the industry, let's say they are just freshers or maybe with a year of experience or 2 years of experience, they look up to people like you and try to speculate what path you have taken, how do they go towards that path, because learning and development in itself is a target for a lot of people who are now doing MBAs, getting into training. So they discuss with us whether we train trainers or not. So we've had those conversations with so many HRs, and that's the reason I want to ask you, what is the one or two things you want to tell freshers who aim to develop a career in this field, because it takes a lot of time and rigor to eventually get to this position. But if they lose, what we've observed is, if one loses the initial 5 to 6 years in just trying to decide which way to go, uh, there's a lag, and then eventually people are very, very unsatisfied. Within the HR domain, people feel that they have not been able to do enough or contribute enough. Especially now, what we are seeing is, even HR has a lot of pressure to talk in terms of metrics, and HR analytics has become a huge domain. There is technology coming in. So on an HR officer, I feel from 4 to 5 directions there is a pressure to cope up. There is a pressure to talk like a business person. There is a pressure to go into the business meetings and talk in terms of ROI, talk in terms of what difference has been made. So I don't think now business leaders think of HR as a cost center anymore, because they demand so much from them now, and they demand them to be productive and come back with the ROI. So what do you think the new officers should do to develop their career, and also what are the new things they need to learn so that they sort of stay ready?
First of all, I think what you said is a lot of chaos in the beginning. It's too much to do. You don't know what to do. The very first thing one has to do is get used to this chaos. If this chaos is not going, it is increasing. As business become more complex, as technology adds and makes it more complex, yeah, each technology is expected to ease things out, but in the interim, it makes things complex first. Burnout happens. Early burnout happens to a lot of people because of this. One possible reason is maybe there is no clarity as to which is the one route that you would pursue after the initial generalist role. What is that you would like to pursue as a specialization? And in maybe a college or so, I think uh, that thought of specialization is still not very crystal clear. In the first 3-4 years of industry, you get attracted to something more than other aspects of your job. In my opinion, educating yourself, getting value added education in that domain is very important. Many HR folks I have interacted or I do interact with, unfortunately, don't spend much on themselves for their own learning, for their own development. Though they sponsor others, they organize programs for others, self they don't. Going ahead, you cannot survive without constantly adding value to yourself, constantly learning cutting edge new, be it technologies, be it new processes, and that gives you the winning edge, the cutting edge. That specialization is something uh, that reduces this burden of chaos, because now you know what you do better. There's one thing. I have a friend who's a microbiology graduate, right? And then came into HR. Now she is my which is taking care of our LMS, learning management system.
Okay.
Now, from microbiology to LMS is a huge shift, right? And she's pretty good at what she does. She's very passionate about what she does. So when I work with her on projects involving digitization of learning programs and stuff, her eyes sparkle and she's creating something new. So identifying this touch, move, inspire me. What kind of work will I be able to do day in and day out without getting burnout? And then moving towards that, identifying niche, moving towards that, acquiring qualifications and credentials in that. So I love, say, talking. So if I give an example, now, talking without purpose maybe will not excite me for my life, but I become a speaker, I become an orator. Yeah, then I'm using my innate skill for an applied purpose. Like I lead, I love conversation. So I learned counseling in the beginning. Then I learned coaching, acquired credentials in coaching. Now say a conversation with me can actually be a guiding force for somebody. So how can I steer the conversation that I learned in the coaching courses? So that 1 hour, the 60 minutes of conversation, the person who is in conversation with me goes back with more clarity, goes back with more goal-oriented behavior. No, this is constant. Earlier, face-to-face coaching was the norm. I used to go, travel, call people to. COVID told us that every time face-to-face is not feasible, possible. Can you do more on using technology? So Zoom coaching is on now. That has opened up a new arena that a person can be anywhere on the globe and we still have that same effectiveness of the coaching conversation. So the path will open up. One need to start learning. I think one Hindi poetry by Bachchan Sahab. I'm not talking about Amitabh Bachchan, but Harivansh Rai Bachchan Sahab and Madhushala. He very beautifully talks about this. He says, मदिरा ले जाने को घर से चलता है पीने वाला. Madirala in this case is not the bar, but success, your destination where you'll enjoy. Everybody wants to reach some place and enjoy success. So मदिरा ले जाने को घर से चलता है पीने वाला, किस पथ से जाओ असमंजस में है वह भोला वाला. अलग अलग पथ बतलाते सब, पर मैं यह बतलाता हूँ, राह पकड़ तू एक चला चल, आ जाएगा मधुश्याम.
Yes.
Yes, there'll be confusing paths that people will tell you, do this, that, but you choose one path. Right? One path that gives you satisfaction, that gives you, and keep growing on that. There'll be challenges, there'll be mushkil. Keep going and you'll reach. I think growing that patience is also required. Many people are so impatient that they and that kind of impacts the career.
Also, I think having a mentor who you could discuss things with helps a lot. Try to Google more than talk to people.
Not
I
one,
believe-
you should have multiple mentors. You
Yes.
should have multiple mentors in different areas of life. That's a very, very, very useful. People with perspective, people who have lived a particular life, they are the huge guides. You should consciously identify mentors, nurture your mentors. And also coaching helps. I think if you get into a coaching conversation with a credentialed coach, that conversation helps. Any tip, any person sitting at high chair and giving you tips doesn't help much, because those are general. Those are like the diet tips given by people, or those are like those share market tips given by people. They don't work. What works is what is that you bring to table. Where are you in your life? What is that where you want to go? The goal-oriented conversation happens with mentors, with coaches especially. So I highly recommend that young people who are who see themselves on the crossroads, hire a coach, have a structured conversation, series of conversations. That's useful. Being a coach, I also have 3 coaches whom I consult on a regular basis. And it's not about age. One of my coaches is 24-year-old young boy who takes me to task, asking very difficult questions. Because young guys bring a very different perspective. Coaches have no age. Coaches are coaches. They're trained in the art of questioning that makes you think in a direction where you're not thought. You can have anybody as your coach, and they will still add value to you.
Correct. So great. Thank you so much, Shashikant sir. I think we have asked more than what we decided for. We made a list of questions. We were brainstorming what all we could ask you, and we had a list of more than 25 questions. And then we had to edit it because time is a limit, and we decided on the 10 most asked questions in our conversations with other HRs, especially the one regarding building a career towards training in pharma. That was something that is a consistent conversation we have had with. So whenever we visit our clients' offices, we used to wait quite some time for meetings, and when we sit outside, there are other juniors we interact with who are probably junior to us. So I have 10 years experience in the industry. So freshers probably, they come to us and they keep discussing, because we speak to a lot of HRs. So they keep on discussing with us as in what path is better for us, because they are in that state of mind. And when they arrive, they feel it will take a lot of time to specialize in something. They get overwhelmed. So the questions that you addressed in the end, I think they will be the most popular answers people
I'll
ask.
give you one example in 30 seconds. So there was this girl whom we spotted she was doing HR generalist role, but some conversations she said, I'm passionate about learning and I want to break in that area. Nobody is giving me because 6-7 years now I'm selfish. We took risk with her. We took her in our team, in L&D team. I really saw the fire in that girl. I became her mentor.
Okay.
Within a year's time, this girl progressed so much. Initiatives, passion, fire, all seen. And after that, she invested around 6-7 lakh rupees, did the OD course from TIS with a small child in her lap, with a 1-year baby. She completed that course. She invested time, money, energy into that course. Now, kind of work she does is awesome. It's 3 years, and she's transformed herself. Industry will give you opportunity if you show the fire. You can't just sit and wait for things to happen to you. And she's not the only example. Right? I gave just few. Some time ago, I spoke to that girl. That's why their example is fresh in mind. So I have seen people changing, transforming within months, within a year, within a 2. You need fire on one side to go to that coveted Madhushala, jahan pe pahunchna hai. And also persistence to walk on the path. This path is not all hunky-dory, it's not with rose petals. There are thorns also. And one has to keep on going.
Correct. That's a great example to have. And I think, Nitika, while we create a transcript of this conversation, please remember to include this example, because a lot of folks think investing as the last or probably never an option into themselves. So
and expect companies to do it. I'm not an advocate of company sponsoring programs. If there is nothing at stake, you're not putting your money at stake. You're not serious about any program. You put your money and grow.
Correct.
Nobody is responsible for your growth but you.
And also that my growth is sort of my property. It'll always going to remain with me, not with the company. It's going to enhance myself.
Organizations will invest into you to train you processes, to train you things that are required for your current role and job, for you to be effective in that. And that's where they are committed, obviously.
Mm.
Not beyond that. Expecting everything from organization is not fair also.
Mm. Correct.
Okay.
Okay, thank you so much, Shashikant sir. We'll end the conversation here, and I think I enjoyed the conversation a lot. We have some more questions from after we publish this conversation. We are going to get a lot of additional questions, which if people want, I will mail to you, and I
Sure.
will connect a few of the folks if they want to you, so that as you say, conversations now, because they are on Zoom, if there are any people who want you to become their mentor, at least we will be able to connect you.
For sure. Always ready for a conversation, a meaningful conversation. Thank
Thank
you
you so
so
much.
Thank
much.
you so much,
Namaste.
sir.
Yes.
Namaste.
Thank you so much. Namaste.